I have no doubt if the Australian Army weren't there in 99, 2000, and especially those years, there would have been a lot more death at the hands of the Indonesian militia for sure.
Welcome to the podcast where we track down Australian war veterans, have a chat with them, and hear their stories. I'm Alex Lloyd, and this is Life on the Line.
The single greatest sacrifice I've made is my family.
We weren't out there to take country, we were out there to do something. That was our job.
I did feel a lot of regret.
Friends were still getting killed.
It got to the point where, you're going to funerals quite often.
Do I lead under fire?
And that was a heavy responsibility, I guess, on my shoulders that I didn't want to screw up.
War itself is horrific. It's a horror story. It should never be dressed up as if it's something glorious.
Not what you can do for yourself, but what can you do for your country.
The volunteer for service was in effect to put your life on the line.
I'm Sharon Mascall-Dare, and you're listening to Life on the Line. Today we meet Chad McLaren, a former member of the Royal Australian Infantry who deployed to East Timor before becoming a medic and then transferring to the Royal Australian Navy. Today, in his civilian life, he's dedicated to supporting veterans. And in fact, today we've come to the Torrens Parade Ground in central Adelaide to record his interview and get a sense of his life and what he's achieved. So Chad, thanks very much for joining us on Life on the Line.
Thank you, Sharon. Thanks for the invite.
So tell us a bit about where you grew up and perhaps some of the influences that you were exposed to in your early life.
Yeah, so I grew up on Kangaroo Island, south of Adelaide. My grandfather was a soldier settler farmer over there. Went over there in 1960, and most of the farmers over on the West End in that period of time were all soldier settlers, so they've all were in World War II together and obviously formed a great bond over there. Yeah, and we left when I was about 10 years old, and we went to Woomera. Dad worked for the Department of Defence up there, and we got to see the might of the US Air Force with the spy base up there, which was a very interesting place to grow up for a young fella.
So were you aware that you were actually growing up in the middle of an intelligence community at that time?
Well, you don't, because I guess you don't see it. You see the Navy uniforms and the Air Force uniforms, but as a 10-year-old, you don't really think that you were in the middle of, some sort of Cold War kind of situation.
What inspired you then to join up yourself?
I was at university and I was 1027th Royal South Australian Regiment as a young infantry soldier. And yeah, once I went to Kapuka, and I was sort of like, well, I think this might be for me. This sort of like fitness and discipline and what have you. And I think that was the right call for me at that time when I was about 20, 21 years old.
So what was it about the kind of army life, the army ethos that really attracted you at that time, do you think?
Well, maybe it's what I needed, probably. I probably needed some discipline and some focus and direction, and of course the Army's great at doing that. So, yeah, I think it was a very good decision to join up with the regular Army and move over to 6RR.
Now, we've had lots of people come on Life on the Line who've talked about their Kapuka experiences, but what was yours like?
Well, Kapuka was interesting. You rock up at 2 a.m. and you have people yelling at you, standing, 3 ranks, and you've never heard what a rank is, and everyone's looking around at each other going, what? And they just physically manhand you and put you in your 3 ranks. Within a couple of days, you know what all the terminology is, where you've got to. Otherwise, you're going to find it pretty tough. I enjoyed the fitness. I enjoyed the structure of the place, and I still enjoy structure in my life today. So maybe those early Kapuka days have implanted some sort of desire for structure in my life, but I have nothing but positive memories from that Kapuka experience.
And then you settled into army life. What were those first few years like?
When did I transfer across to the regular Army? October 1999, and then we basically, as soon as I got to Brisbane to 6RR, we were preparing to deploy to East Timor. So there wasn't really any time to settle in. It was straight into kind of operational readiness, and the tempo was pretty full on. And then we went over April 2000.
So as a young man at that time, what did you know about East Timor? And indeed, what did you know about Indonesia as well?
Yeah, very, very little. The Army was good. They gave us a good briefing and a good education of the country, what to expect. Obviously, we learnt the local language and what have you. But as a 21, 22-year-old, no, not a lot of knowledge of East Timor, no.
What did you think you were going into then? What were you told about the mission and what you'd be doing over there?
They painted a good picture of what it was like. I don't think there was any sugarcoating. There was obviously, it was a pretty horrendous scene over there from September 99 with Interfet and what the Indonesian Army were doing at that time. We had full briefings of what was going on there. So we knew we were going into something pretty ordinary.
Were you afraid? Were you conscious of the fact you were exposing yourself to risk by going on that deployment?
When you're 22, you don't really sort of fear too much. There was definitely a bit of probably anxiety around maybe what was going to happen, of course. But as far as, being kind of scared or what have you, probably not that kind of sense of that kind of feeling, but more kind of apprehension and anxiety of what are we going to see here. Once we sort of rolled out into the area of operations, it was kind of pretty easy to kind of settle into, operational tempo, what we had to do.
And what did you have to do? What was your kind of day-to-day routine like?
From April 2000, it was basically patrolling and keeping the area, our area of operations, safe from any kind of militia activity that had come across the border from Indonesia. And at that point, they were still quite active in many areas, so patrols were very frequent. We had a strong presence in that area. Obviously, we had a full battalion in that space, so, by the time we left, basically the activity kind of had ceased, which we were pretty pleased about.
So tell us about some of the prevailing memories you have of that deployment.
Well, I think definitely the people, Sharon. I think, patrolling around in some of the areas that basically no English was spoken, there was no electricity, there was no running water, but the people were just so lovely. The smiles on their faces when they saw us, they'd give their shirts off their back if we were cold. The food, they would just look after us. I remember one time we were camping at a school, and all of a sudden this group of sort of 6 or 7 people, grabbed us, took us down to their kind of local church on the top of this ridge. It was all full of candles. They made us sit at the front row, which is, the seats were very, very small. But we all sat on the front row. They gave us coconuts and we're drinking out of the coconuts. And they just couldn't have been any more nicer people. And that's, one of the memories. And we got to some villages, and, the chief had moved out of his house and said, here, well, not really a house, they were little huts, grass huts. And you guys are in here. So where are you saying, Chief? Oh, I'm sleeping on the ground outside. It's like, well, okay, well, there's some thanks for that, and we were just so appreciated, and that's my lasting memory, that those people were just so thankful and beautiful and appreciative of us being there.
Did you have a real sense that you were changing things for them, that you were contributing directly to their safety, to their security?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have no doubt if the Australian Army weren't there in 99, 2000, and especially those years, there would have been a lot more death at the hands of the Indonesian militia, for sure. We'd get reports where they were, we'd kind of be chasing them, and then as soon as they knew we were on their tail, they were going back to Indonesia. So we basically just chased them back over the border, and then they just stopped coming after a while. So we had the night operations we'd set up ambushes on the border. The Indonesian Army on the other side of the river knew we were there, so that obviously tipped them off that we were there, and that presence was enough for them to they just gave up and they stopped coming.
Was there a sense, though, of risk then? If you were exposed to the fact that you had the militia there at any time, you didn't know where they were, that must have given you a sense of having to be constantly on alert.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That military, that training that the Australian Army gives you, you set up an ambush, you set up properly, and if someone wants to come through it and put the people at risk that you're trying to look after, well, look, there's not much you can do about it. If they want to come over and hurt people, hey, that's their thing, and we're going to do what we've got to do.
So when you came back from Timor, you decided to change corps and become medic. So how did that come about?
The medical profession was always interested in me from a younger age, becoming obviously the pinnacle of your career with infantry soldiers going overseas and protecting people from an oppressor in a foreign country, which I did. So it was a kind of thought, okay, well, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? And medical was it for me.
What was it then about the medical profession that really attracted you? Was it that you wanted to care for people, or was it something about just being hands-on and really quite practically oriented?
No, I'm not very practically oriented, Sharon. No, it's definitely helping people. That's what, I mean, ever since I transferred across as a medic in 2003, that's what I've been doing ever since in military and in civilian life. So, yeah, it is about helping people. I get a real, sense of achievement about caring for people and making sure they're cared for.
And what was your training like? I mean, having been taught how to handle weapons, how to be part of a section as an infantryman, that change across to being a medic, what really stood out to you as the shifts that you had to make, perhaps psychologically, in terms of performing a different role within a military environment?
The Navy medical training is a bit like an apprentice system where you go in and do sort of 8 months worth of quite intense medical training. It involved a lot of theory and a lot of practical. It's quite intense. I mean, that the information you're required to know and are required to reproduce is significant. And then you go off and do off to your hospital in Sydney, off to the HMAS Penguin at the Navy Medical Hospital, Navy Hospital. and put that training into place. My time at the Navy Hospital was fantastic. I had some great mentors there. Then it came time to go back down to HMAS Cerberus for 4 months of intense training and to become an advanced medic. And that was just fantastic to be able to consolidate all that initial training and learn more. Then we went to sort of Frankston Hospital, we went to Victorian Ambulance Service. That time I had as medic training was obviously integral to the time after my Navy career. Just set me up very, very well.
What was it, though, about being a medic that you enjoyed so much? Because clearly that then ended up becoming your long-term career, even after you left the military, which we'll come to in a moment. What was it about being a medic that appealed to you so much, as well as just the helping people factor? Was there something about the kind of the art of being a medic that really worked for you?
Yeah, I guess it's not everyone's forte, but one thing I did enjoy was on a HMAS Newcastle with 220 people, there's 2 or 3 medics, and when things go wrong, that people look at you. So I quite enjoy the fact that from, wherever it is, it might be on a mine site, it might be on a ship, it might be in a hospital, it might be anywhere. When it's your turn, and there's only a couple of people probably in that room that could actually do it. So it's a good skill to be able to have that, to be able to, when things go wrong, you can actually do something.
And just tell us as well the difference between Army and Navy, given that you lived that experience of changing from one service to another. What are the differences between them?
I get asked that all the time, what was the best one? I don't think there was a best one. They're totally different. They perform totally different roles. I like to say that as a 21-year-old, I was the Army infantry. That was the perfect grounding for me, and to do my time there was very important to shape the person who I've become, and then to have that experience to then go into the Royal Australian Navy, and where work is a little bit more autonomous, especially at sea. You don't have someone holding your hand all the time. There's not a team of 8 or 9. There's no section commander. There's no lance corporal. There's no sergeant. There's a lot of the time, if you're in the engine room down the bottom and something goes wrong, or if you're the medic, if something goes wrong, you're the one. You just get it. So I think Navy, a lot of those roles are a little bit more autonomous, and you have to have that kind of little bit more maturity about you to be able to handle that kind of role.
And you went on to deploy with the Navy in 2004 on border security operations. Tell us a bit about that, and perhaps how that deployment, understandably, would have been very different from going to Timor. What were the main differences and what were the standouts in terms of your memories from that time?
Yes, well, the operational tempos obviously wasn't quite what it was in East Timor. Patrolling around the northern parts of Australia on HMAS Newcastle, it was an interesting experience. Obviously they knew that my background, the Army, so of course I became part of the boarding party. I was a medic with a pistol, which was pretty cool, and training to be part of that boarding party was pretty special. That there was a good group of people every day. We'd be doing some training and what have you, some scenarios. The Army come on board, so there was a platoon of I think 1RAR soldiers come on board. We did not intercept any boats whilst I was on operations. So the tempo was we woke up and did the same thing every day. Boarding party training. So yeah, no, it wasn't quite intense as the East Timor experience. Yeah.
What's it like, though, being at sea? I mean, for people listening to this edition of Life on the Line that have not got Navy experience and perhaps have never spent a long time away on a ship, what is it like?
It's very monotonous. I can't speak for other rates on board, but as a medic, we had a bit of time. We had we had sick parade a couple of times a day, and we had cafe duties and what have you. So I was able to go to the gym, sit up on the upper decks and just look out over the water, and it is quite peaceful, especially when you get out of that horrible water in the Southern Ocean where, no upper deck time. It's all bunker down and make sure that, everything's secure. But when you're cruising around in the Northern Australian waters, it's very, very peaceful. In fact, I think I recall the captain doing a lot of fishing in my time. He used to catch some big fish, I remember. In the calmer waters, it's quite enjoyable.
And what was the longest period that you were away at sea for? because this is something else I think that people don't appreciate about serving in the Royal Australian Navy, and indeed navies throughout the world, is you can be away from your family and you can be away from dry land for a very long time.
I would say it would have been 2 months we were away from home, a month we were on operations, and the other month we were basically on exercise. So that exercise was very interesting. I've never been part of that, where no upper decks, you go on to a different kind of watch routine. For a week, you don't see sun. So it's red light down below, and you go into a different kind of routine, and you don't see sunlight for a week, and you're part of you're part of an exercise group where you're doing manoeuvres and things with other navies and what have you. But yeah, that was an interesting time, not seeing sun for a week.
How did that affect you?
I was glad to pull into Garden Island on the Friday, that's for sure.
Now tell us also about your sporting achievements while you're in the ADF, because you were very involved in Aussie rules football, weren't you?
I did play a few seasons with the Navy, the Navy national team. Yeah, I'd say I come out of that with a couple of injuries, but that particular experience, I've got some wonderful mates that I made playing football for the Navy, and they'll be lifelong friends. Yeah, and sharing particular beating the Army was a big highlight. Obviously, coming from the Army and beating the Army was pretty cool for me.
Why is it that sport is such an integral part of culture within the Australian Defence Force? Because there are some people within the ADF that sport ends up becoming a primary focus for them, doesn't it?
It's all about kind of teamwork, isn't it? So, how do you fit in? Everyone's got to be part of a team, whatever unit you're in. So it just transfers over, and I think what you can learn from the team sports, you can bring back to your unit, and you can take stuff from your unit to the football field, and it just works. They go just perfectly together.
Now, you decided to discharge from the ADF. Tell us a bit about the decision-making process that led you to that point, and how indeed then sport remained part of your life even when you left.
Yeah, I think 10 years was enough for me in the military. Probably time to come back to Adelaide. I was probably focused on a fitness kind of career in some way or another. And when I did come back to Adelaide, I was just living up near Norwood Oval when I went in there and inquired about being part of their medical team. And the football operations manager said, would I be interested in the fitness coaching job? And of course, being from Adelaide and, knowing that Norwood is almighty football club here in South Australia, of course I said yes. And I was very lucky to stay there for 4 years. I say to a lot of people that transition out of the ADF through Norwood Football Club I look back at it now, and only now, that I do appreciate how great it was for me. Obviously going into a civilian environment, but there's discipline, there's a rank structure, there's fitness involved. The group of guys, like you get sort of 18 to 32, which is very similar to kind of military, kind of infantry age group, doing all the very similar things that the infantrymen do, as you can imagine. I just treasure that 4-year period. There's some closest friends there as well, so yeah, I cherish that 4 years at Norwood Football Club as well.
Now, you mentioned how going into football and working in sport set you up for success in terms of transition, but what about the skills that you're able to transfer across from what you learnt in the Australian Defence Force to then being in the civilian world? How did that work for you?
How to develop functioning teams was one thing that was really important for me. How does discipline and how does being an integral part of a team bring success to a football club? So different, I guess, the military, there's no kind of grand final, there's no one wins. So to have that kind of focus as at the end, to be able to drive people to be the best teammate, to be the most disciplined, to follow the team rules, to be a good team player, you do those things really well, and then the success comes at the end. So for me, to be able to teach that to those guys, and then a success did come at the end, whereas in the military, you can be very, very good at those things and still there's no kind of, no one's winning at the end, there's no outcome. That's one thing that I try to instill into the football club, is that you put all those things in place that the military do, and then at the end, success will just come to you. And it did. Norwood won premiership in 2012, 13 and 14. So I think, I'm quite proud of being able to set the wheels in motion for that and create a culture at the football club, that kind of military type mindset was able to breed success there.
Why then did you decide to move on from sport to then moving back into your other expertise, which was being a medic? How did that shift came about in your civilian life after being in the ADF?
Well, I had the opportunity we moved to Western Australia at the start of 2012, and I had the opportunity to work in mining exploration as a paramedic and to leave football. I'd thought I'd probably achieved what I wanted to set out in football, and it was maybe time to move on after 4 years. So I think going back into my paramedic role that I did when I was in the Navy seemed like a bit of a natural thing to do. Get out and see a bit of Australia as well. So I was up in the remote areas of Western Australia in the Pilbara with the Fortescue Medals as a exploration paramedic, and what a great experience that was. And that kind of just set me up for the rest of my career as a paramedic in the mining and oil and gas industry.
And throughout this time, and this is one of the reasons why we're doing today's interview at the Torrens Parade Ground, you never forgot your friends, colleagues, mates in the Australian Defence Force though, and the importance of looking after veterans was always a central focus for you. Tell us a bit about why that remained such a focus for you, and indeed it is symbolic that we're doing the interview in this environment here today, which is a place in South Australia which is seen very much as the heart of the city's commemorations to some degree. Not far from here we've got the National War Memorial on North Terrace. We've also got the Anzac Memorial Walk. Why is it that caring for veterans and that respect for people who've served before us and indeed who are still serving today, why has that remained such a central part of your life?
Well, I'm immensely proud of being a previous member of the ADF and being a veteran. I'm very proud of being part of that community. It's very much a very tight community. Everyone cares for each other, respects each other, looks out for each other. And when I see that a lot of people, veterans, leaving the ADF, really struggling, coming home from Afghanistan and trying to reintegrate back into society after they've served their time or what have you. It was just heartbreaking to see so many people suffering mental health issues, and I just sort of felt like I had to do something.
And part of the work you've been doing has been setting up the National Walk for a Veteran initiative. What is that initiative, and how did you go about setting it up, and what does it stand for?
Yeah, so I guess there's two parts to it. It's just mates getting together and just going for a walk and having a chat and basically looking after each other and raising a few dollars and giving it to where it needs to go. The other part was I felt with the Anzac Day, it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I felt there was a sense in the community that people wanted to connect with veterans and hear about their story and support them in more of a way than just commemorating on Anzac Day. So the walk was set up to basically bring the community and veterans together whilst giving veterans an opportunity to reconnect with their friends and their friends' families. And it's a real inclusive kind of event. We try and encourage everyone to come and share their stories and be part of it. What we've added to it is we've added an emergency services community element to it as well. I've worked with the South Australian Metropolitan Fire Service for 12 months previously, and those guys and girls have exactly the same mindset as our ADF, but what they do is they help on a domestic level. They help obviously ambulance, fire and police, and I think having them become part of this event has just strengthened the bonds between veterans and emergency services. And I think, as you can see probably around the country, that those two groups are really kind of forging together a lot more, as previously they probably didn't. I think people can understand that the mindset and the characters are all very much similar.
You say about the importance of storytelling and the fact the public want to be able to engage with people from a service background to understand their stories and really have that sense of connection with what people who have served our country have contributed. What kinds of stories have you come across that you feel really should be told and that perhaps, have come to light as a result of your Walk for a Veteran initiative?
As so many people have come up to me, civilians have come up to me at the end of various walks and said, I was just talking with a guy who was in, I can't remember what unit it was, they say. He was in the army. He told me the story and I just couldn't believe it. And we talked for 2 hours along the beach, or it was in the Adelaide Hills. And so that's happening, that's just one story. This is happening right across, the walk area. Every year this is happening. I've got a real sense of how important it was for community to actually let veterans know how proud they are of them. It was ended probably the second walk, and this guy at the bar just broke down crying, this old Vietnam veteran. Apparently he's as tough as nails, and he just broke down and cried, and someone said, "What's wrong?" And he goes, "I've never heard anyone say they're proud of me for my service before." And I think this is just a wonderful opportunity. It gives you the walk's like 10 hours, and it just gives everyone a chance to come together. So a veteran they've gone to Afghanistan, and you talk to a firefighter that's pulled people out of a building or car accident, and they can share those kind of similar stories. I know that they're not exactly the same, and it's probably good that they're not. So you can kind of gauge where each other come from. You kind of come from a similar space, but not exactly the same story. So it's very interesting to be able to kind of share each other's kind of histories.
And what is it, do you think, about walking and walking shoulder to shoulder that actually allows those stories to be told? Is there something about that particular way of communicating that perhaps facilitates this process that you're speaking about?
No one's in a hurry. There's people, that do kind of endurance events. They seek them out, and when we put 40-kilometre walk on the event, you get kind of these people that want to do it as fast as possible, and we kind of have to stress every year that this is not a race. This is about just enjoying the day, about just walk along with your friends, make some new friends. But this is not a race. This is about, spending time with people that you might not know, listening to their stories, and maybe leaving the day with a little bit of a different perspective on, what our military people have had to do and what they now suffer from because of that.
And coming to this place, to the Torrens Parade Ground, to the Memorial Precinct, which does have such significance and meaning for so many South Australians, what's your experience of being here? What does this place mean for you?
Yeah, well, I guess it's the home of veterans in South Australia. So, as I said, as a proud military person, this is kind of our spiritual home, I suppose, with a fantastic new remembrance walk. Wow, that's incredible. And with the National War Memorial, so you can go from the War Memorial down the walk to the Torrens Parade Ground and everything. It's just so much history. There's so much pride. For a veteran, that's just a wonderful place for us.
And just tell us, you will have your next Walk for a Veteran event in August. It's going to be held in South Australia. It's going to be held in Mount Crawford Forest. Will you be walking?
Yes. So that's one thing that I've done. So this is year 6. The first year was 3 of us, and of course all 3 of us did it. But now we're a full sort of charity, and we've got a committee, and each year they plead with me, you need to help, because we just get so busy now on the day. I think this year we'll have 500 or 600 walkers. So they plead with me not to walk and to help, but I said, no, my job is to get out there and walk and talk to people and mingle around and see how people are going and try and facilitate any kind of conversations that I can. But that's what I do. I try and just get out and talk to people and listen to other people's stories as well.
Now, for people listening to today's Life on the Line, you've shared your story. They obviously have tuned in because they're interested in hearing stories such as yours and others who've also served. What would you like them to take away from having listened to today's podcast?
A lot of us have this understanding of when you sign on the line, when you enrol. So when you enlist in the ADF, that basically you're signing a blank cheque. I was very lucky, no one actually cashed that in, and I was lucky to discharge Med Class 1. But a lot of my mates, that cheque was cashed, and they didn't come out of the ADF in the same state as when they went in, which is it's quite sad. But what's even sadder is that potentially they're not looked after in the best way possible. So we need to think about how can we look after our veterans a little bit better. They've obviously put their life on the line for their country, and I think their country could probably look after them a little bit better.
Chap McLaren, thank you very much for sharing your story with us today and for all you are doing to care for veterans in our community.
Sharon, thank you for the opportunity.
You've been listening to Life on the Line. I'm Sharon Mascall-Dare.
You can find us online at Life on the Line Podcast on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube, at LOTL Pod on Twitter, and at Thistle Productions on LinkedIn. Our website is www.lifeonthelinepodcast.com. Life on the Line is brought to you by Thistle Productions, artwork by Big Cat Design, music by Dan Van Werkhoven. Thank you for listening, and lest we forget,